When the first part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake was released last year, I was quite nervous about how they would handle remaking one of my favorite games of all time. However, most of that nervousness went away after I dug into it, and by the time the credits rolled, I was already excited for whatever Part 2 will bring. In the time since I've put the game down, my mind started wondering what other Final Fantasy games could benefit from this style of remake, and it didn't take me long to come to Final Fantasy VIII. So why Final Fantasy VIII? Well, some games just come to you at that perfect time in your life. They leave an impression that you never forget, and no matter their faults, you still see them through rose-colored glasses. Final Fantasy VIII is one of those games for me. The minute that opening cinematic came on and the music started playing, middle school Zach was hooked. That being said, no matter how much you love Final Fantasy VIII, you have to admit it had some problems. Those problems are exactly why it would be a perfect fit for the Final Fantasy VII Remake treatment. They took a lot of liberties with different aspects of that game, and they could do the same with FF8 to fix a lot of the problems that the original suffered from. So let's dig into what exactly I would like to see changed, and what I hope stays the same if they ever did decide to do this. Let's first talk about the core of the game, which is the setting, story, and characters. Now obviously these have to stay pretty much the same or it wouldn't be the same game at all, and that's not what we want. Luckily, I think the setting is actually really good and doesn't need any changes. The world itself is pretty interesting. With updated graphics and more to explore, it could be really well realized. Now, the story and characters were, well, not good. That being said, I think they both suffered from the same problem and could be fixed just by diving deeper into the game and expanding it the same way they did FF7. The story especially was super rushed and never did a good job of pulling us in or setting us up for the plot twist they had planned. Because of that, some things felt a bit ridiculous at times. Like they skipped a lot of information that we needed to get to the conclusions that they were going for. Finally, since the story is so character driven, if they had more game time to expand on backstory and really dive into character development, we would connect with them a lot more, and in turn the story would be much better and make a lot more sense. The next thing on the list would be the gameplay and thus the battle system. Now at its core, the FF8 battle system is like pretty much all other Final Fantasy turn-based systems, and it's pretty good. Most people would want it to be turned into an action RPG like they did with 7, and that would work wonderfully. Personally, I would be fine with it remaining turn-based, but either way would work great. The real problem with the gameplay was the magic system being tied into your stats. You were able to draw magic from enemies and tie it to whatever stat you wanted, and the more of that magic you had on the stat, the stronger the stat was. For example, if you had 99 fires on your strength stat, you would be super strong, or 99 cures on your HP and you would have a ton of hit points. In theory, the idea was cool, and to top it off, you didn't need to worry about leveling because enemies would level with you. In reality though, it didn't work like that at all. You just spent long battles drawing new magic from enemies until you were full of them, then you never actually used any magic because it would make your character's stats worse. And since leveling up your characters just made the enemies level up also, it made the game more difficult. Therefore, you would spend a couple battles in every new area drawing as many new magic spells as you could, then you would run from all other battles so that you didn't level up and make the game harder. It was an absolute mess. They basically would need to completely do away with that system and start over, with a more traditional leveling system. I actually did like the way they handled Guardian Forces, the game's version of summons. You leveled them separate of your character and they had abilities tied to them. Some of the abilities completely broke the game, making it ridiculously easy, but with just a few adjustments, it could work well in a remake. The final aspect I want to talk about is the music, and wow. This was the one part of the game, in my opinion, that was absolutely perfect. Like most of the Final Fantasy series, the music was composed by the legendary Nobuo Uematsu. All of the games he worked on had fantastic music, but this one in particular was one of his best works. That being said, I would actually like to see a rework of the soundtrack in a remake. We already have all the original music, so it would be really cool to see what they could do with remixes of all the tracks. I think if done correctly, a remake could take Final Fantasy VIII from the lower end of the series to one of the highlights. Anyway, these are obviously just my thoughts, and I wanted to put them into a video. I would like to know what Final Fantasy game you think would be perfect for a remake. Let me know down in the comments below. As always guys, I'm Zach. Thanks for being a part of the Amateur family, and I'll see you in the next video.